So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through a few slides, very few slides, because most time people actually want to see the technology. So we're going to work through about 3 or 4 slides so I can explain some things to you, give you some context about what I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to show it to you, and then we're going to have a Q&A session after it. Any questions? All right. So we're going to discuss the performance, past performance. So because one of the things we always talk about is performance is best dictated by how it's done before. So we can very easily determine what our future performance could be by our past performance. We'll talk about the customer service application. We'll do a demo, and then we'll do some questions. So Pega Customer Service is actually installed in 60 or 70 different agencies or organizations around the world. I picked out 3 to try to give you some idea of what they got out of their installation that I think any government agent would actually want to try to get out of an installation that they accomplish. So let's talk about farmers. 20% improvement in claims processing. The government is not centric to claims processing, but it's certainly centric to processing information and trying to get things through the pipeline to be completed. If you can get 20% of improvement, I don't think any agency would bite at that. PayPal, they processed 45 million requests last year. So scale and the ability to deal with large volumes is also not going to be a problem for this application. And TD Bank, they did a 30% increase in one-touch customer resolutions, meaning the first time the customer touched the application, they were able to get their resolution. And again, that is a major goal, I would think, of any government agency. I've worked in 3 different government agencies as a blue badge and 5 as a green badge. So I've had some experience working in various agencies, so I have an idea about this. Okay. Pega Customer Service. Okay, so Pega Customer Service is built this way. You start with the baseline of Pega 7, which is Pega's application framework that they provide to you for any development effort that you want to accomplish. It includes a base set of features and functionalities that are available to Pega 7. On top of that, based on Pega's experience with those other organizations in building their customer service applications, we tried to figure out what was the commonalities. What makes this organization and this organization the same? And they take those things and they created an application called Pega Customer Service that has a basic set of features to try to help anybody who is using customer service have a kickstart in what they want to do. On top of that, they added some additional features for specialization: call, chat, Cobrowse, social, and knowledge management. Again, different features that you may or may not need depending on what your organization is doing or how your organization chooses to interact with the public, but key features in how you interact with them. And the final layer was Pega Marketing. And Pega Marketing is essentially Pega trying to help you marry your business needs with what the customer needs to accomplish. For example, if I go to the DMV and I apply for a driver's license, they never ask me, what's your insurance information? Because that's something that I legitimately need to drive. But if we can drive a person to say, or we can direct a person to say, hey, you filled out an application, do you have insurance? I can direct you to this state-sponsored insurance. I can direct you to these other organizations that have insurance to try to help that customer get to that final goal of actually driving, being able to drive a car. That's what Pega Marketing does. It takes the information from that customer and the business goals of your organization and tries to recommend what is the next best action for this particular customer to perform in order for them to achieve the ultimate goal of trying to complete whatever process or whatever cycle they're trying to complete. Any questions on that? Okay. But you get it all in one complete uniform platform. You don't have to buy or upsell or add-ons. This is what you get when you purchase Pega Customer Service. This is the unified platform. In addition, we can look at the top and we talk about our omni-channel communication. I think you guys have heard that mentioned in a couple of sessions, especially sessions this morning, where we're trying to meet the customer where they're trying to meet us. So through chat, through your phones, through your computers and your pads, all these different types of things. And on the back end, we don't need to hold all of that data. There's not a government agency that I know that doesn't have a legacy applications that store tons and tons of their data. That's fine. The customer service application can actually utilize a lot of that data and make it available within the application for the CSR as well as for the customer who is actually trying to receive the request. And then you have your additional applications that people always buy. We can always figure out APIs and various ways for us to interact with those things, okay? So, like I said, my slides are done. We are on to the demo. So, let's start here. I'm sorry. Let me introduce the demo. John Smith has recently lost his job and needs to understand what his potential benefits and services that might be available to him during this transitional period. A very real world example of what happens to people and what they need to do and try to discover. So with our demo, what we're going to show is how John can go to a self-service portal and potentially handle his problems himself and potentially work through them himself. He'll also get a chance to interact with a CSR in case he's unable to do those things. We'll also show you about some mobile and some social capabilities within the application that John will take advantage of. And then at the end, what we'll do is we'll change the application, because a lot of times when people buy these types of applications, they say, you know, what happens if I need to change? It's a little different for me than it is for this person. I can show you how quickly and how easily it is to just implement changes within Pega. We understand that, and we build our applications with the understanding that they will have to change. Hence our tagline, build for change. So let's go here. All right. So John Smith does what any person would do in this situation. They go to Google and they say, you know, I have some questions. I've heard some rumors and some people tell me I've lost this job. Maybe I can talk about unemployment and tax relief. Google comes back and says, hey, here's an article right here on tax relief that's available on MyGov. And John can look it over and say, you know, this sounds like something that I might be interested in. He click on it and he actually is able to view that article and see the information about it and say, wow, this is actually perfect. Let me go to the MyGov website. I've been there before. I didn't know they had this information, but let me go and let me check it out. So he clicks on and he goes to a website that is pre-designed for him as MyGov. And I'm going to log in as John. When John comes in, there's a couple of things I want to point out that we see. Because John has been here, we'll do that. Before, we have a bunch of information about John. So we don't have to collect this information from him. We can utilize this information to determine what we want to display to him. On the left-hand side, we see some quick links. And this is something that is 100% configurable if you were to build this application within your environment to say, here are the processes that I want to be available to John. We can even make those processes specific based on a user's tendencies, based on a user's profile, based on a user's anything. You can determine what you want to make available to that individual user. Shows some history, some things that John has done, some additional services, and so forth and so on. So he gets here and he's a little overwhelmed. It's just so much stuff. I'm not really sure what I want to do. So what he says is, well, let me initiate a chat. I'm sorry. I need to check something. That's what I figured. So on the opposite side of this, you have a CSR. And the CSR, this is the CSR's desktop. We've seen John's desktop. This is the CSR's desktop. And the CSR is doing what CSRs do. They sit there and they wait for requests to come in so that they can field those requests. In this case, this CSR is going to configure themselves to work a chat queue. They're going to log into this chat queue for claims. We only put claims here just for this purpose of this demo. It could be any number of cues that that person puts together based on whatever that CSR's specialties are. And it'll connect. So they're waiting. So let's go back to John. I'm going to jump around a bit, so just work with me. So John is back here, and he puts in his request. He's going to chat with that CSR and says, you know, I'm here. What should I do? At that point, that CSR will be prompted on their side that John is a veteran. John is here. He has a question about what he should do and whether or not I need to accept or I can decline that request. 9 times out of 10, they're going to go ahead and accept that request. Once they accept that request, some key things happen. We know that John is the person who has contacted us. So because we know that, we can pull all the information to John, about John, for that CSR to view. Now, I've worked at a couple places where you got your mainframe screen over here, and you got your Windows screen over here, and you got your books over here, and you got all these different things that you have to use in order to service that person, and you're not really sure which one you want to do or which one you need. This gives you a single place to pull and display all that information to that CSR. We see in the upper right-hand corner, we see the chat window where we can talk to John. In the left-hand side, we see the neutral face with the straight line mouth. Essentially, what that tells us is what is our current relationship with John. The last time we talked to John, how did we feel about that interaction? If it's a frown, we need to modify our speak, our conversation with John. We need to understand that we need to be more apologetic, more sympathetic. If it's a smile, we want to maintain that smile. So we want to make sure our language dictates those kinds of things. Also, you see here, you see this clock that's counting. That clock is basically a SLA. Every CSR has how much time it should take them to try to come to resolution on any individual case. So that clock gives that CSR some idea of how this is going to work. You start to see texts like, hello, Mr. John, I'm happy to talk to you today. How can I help you? Those are help texts that will be pre-populated every time a CSR meets a person. We all are in situations where we hire people and we have to train them. This is a way to put that training right into the tool so that that person can more quickly come up to speed and be able to utilize the application, because the value is right there in that we can reduce our training time because we're prompting them and guiding them through their interaction with John. So on the last thing is, on the left-hand side, is a list of tasks. Based on who John is, I have this list of tasks that I can actually add to augment his request should I need to. Should he ask me something, hey, I also need to change my billing address? Sure. I go here, I add this task, I change his billing address. These are the types of things that CSR can do. We put that CSR in a position to empower them to complete the job, not to pass John on to some other person. Hey, let me pass you on to a different department that handles billing, or let me hand you on to another department that handles address changes. We put all those things right in front of the CSR. We also put all of our last interactions, any open cases that John may have. So we have a complete picture of John. That's the goal, is to give that CSR a complete picture, regardless of where this data is stored within the application or within the community or within the environment. So let's go ahead and let's talk back to John and let's see what how can I help? And John lets them know that he saw a tax relief. Sorry. Okay, so the CSR sees that and says, okay, the CSR has what we call a knowledge base. And I heard someone talking about it earlier today, that we don't share stuff or we don't remember stuff that we do as individuals. So we put this knowledge base together that you can populate with stuff from your organization. And we're going to type in tax. and hit the search. And it brings back an article. This case is just one article, but it can be any number of articles that it brings back that we can then look at, validate the article to see if it's relevant to the situation that we're working on. And if we deem necessary, we can share that article. I can say, go ahead and take this article and send it to John because he's asked about it. I think this can help him out. And I send that off to John, and in John's email, he'll get this article that I sent, and I can notify John that I sent you an article. So John gets back, he sees the note, he says, okay, well, let me check my email. Goes down here, checks his Gmail account, does a refresh on his Gmail account. Come on. Let's log out. There we go. Did I lose my internet connection? There we go. There's John loading up. I gotta check that. It sends him an email. That's an old email, but I'll check it and see why I didn't send the email. But sends John an email, so John has that information and he's in his inbox. At that point, John makes a decision that he needs to review this information before he proceeds any further. So he lets the CSR know, thanks. I'll get back to you. And at that point, the CSR from their side, having satisfied this initial interaction with John, they move to what we call a wrap-up phase. So there's a closing to every interaction that you have. You want to track that information. You want to understand what just transpired so that you can use that statistically as well as informationally to figure out what you want to do the next time, or so we can solve these same problems the next time. It might put us in a situation where we update the website because we've gotten this question 10, 12, 15 times. Things like that. So he comes here and he says, the reason for the interaction was to give a knowledge management answer. No, we're not going to send a chat log, no prior inquiry, and we can rate that transaction. We're going to go ahead and we're going to rate ourselves a 10. We were great. We were great. And we submit. And at that point, we have completed the cycle on that interaction and are able to statistically track information as well as store information about that interaction with John. Okay? Any questions? Yes.
So when you log that information,
Sure.
Do you have the chance to update it if in a QA check you find that the CSR has made an error, and then you can track that back through CSR coaching to figure out if there's something they don't understand in the process or if they're just not doing the right thing?
Yes. The simple answer is yes. All of that information, you can generate reports on it. You can generate any type of output that you want to use or any type of analysis that you would like. You can generate on that information and then use that analysis to take action again. I was going to say against a CSR. That's probably not the best term, but take action to remedy the situation. How about that? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just of the demo and the functionality you showed, just how much of that is like pre-canned out of the box versus stuff that's kind of customized or tailored to that individual situation or that company or service organization?
So all of the functionality is pre-canned out of the box. The things that are configured, because they don't need to be customized. You just need to add the things that are specific to you. Are what are your responses? How do you want? What names do you want? What articles do you want? Things like that. But the actual chat, the interaction, the wrap up, all of those things are out of the box, available to you. Any other questions? All right, so let's move on because John is still trying to get his problem solved. So we're going to close this chat out. He quits that chat and he finally reads his article and he determines, okay, I think I'm ready, but I want to go ahead and I want to apply for this unemployment insurance first. I want to go ahead and apply. So he chooses unemployment and it brings him to a guided form. that basically says, what is your intent? We know your intent is to complete your form. We're going to ask you for the minimum amount of information necessary to complete this form. That way we can get through it as quickly as possible and get you done as quick as we can. So he's going to start filling out the form. And what I mean by minimum information is if I say I'm able to work, yes. If I say I'm not able to work, it'll start prompting me for more information. That way I can minimize the amount of information. If someone is available for work, I don't need to ask them, or they don't need to traverse or even read through some of this other information. They're able to just quickly get through the form. So we're going to work our way through. Because I know information about John, we're going to pre-populate as much of the form as we possibly can. All right. So John gets to this page and he has a question because they gave him a golden parachute and he's not quite sure how to enter this information into this unemployment request. So John says he's going to initiate that chat again. He says, I have questions about the income details. And that CSR, again, is waiting for those new things. It pops up again with a new chat. And all this, John hasn't made a phone call. We are still servicing him, and he hasn't actually called us yet. So we accept the request. Yes.
Countdown?
Say it again.
Is that a countdown timer?
Right. So it's a countdown. Her question was, is that a countdown timer we saw next to accept? And the answer is yes. Because it's a queue of potential people who could take it, we put it on the first person's queue that we get available, and then we count down, and if that person hasn't picked it up in that 30 seconds, then we go to the next person in the queue or the next available person in the queue. Yes, sir.
Sorry,
I hope you're wearing your Fitbit.
I know, right? I can probably be loud enough. So you were just mentioning some rules there, and I just wanted to confirm things like how the queue operates, how long it counts down for.
Sure.
All of that's customizable, right? So if I want sort of the person that John had been talking to, you, right, in
Sure.
this model, to be sort of the first person to look at that and say, by the way, you've been chatting with this guy for a while, maybe you should pick it up or have some kind of preference in there. Is that all, that's all configurable in there? I can sort of make those preferences a part of it?
It's 100% configurable.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You had the same question? Yes, 100% configurable. Okay. So John is back. He's ready to start talking to the next to the CSR. I'm sorry, to John is back. The CSR is ready to start talking to him. And one of the features that are within customer service is he knows he has questions about the income details, and John says, "Can we co-browse?" And that request is sent to John, who sees it and says, sure, if you think it'll help. All right. So as part of that, the CSR has the capability to initiate what we call a co-browse. And co-browse is pretty simple. I mean, if any of you have used, these are features that are very common in some of the support sites that I've seen at places like Verizon. The guy does it on my machine, even some much smaller places. But it's a very common feature that your customer would love to be able to interact with you and be able to accept that. So it's asking for us to accept this co-browse request. So John has to actually accept it. And once John accepts the co-browse request, the CSR screen will refresh, and they will then have access to view exactly what John is seeing. So they see the screen as John sees it. Give it a second. There we go. So they see the same screen John sees. And they're able to communicate with John through the text or chat or however they want to continue their conversation with John. And eventually they can say, this is the place that you care about. This is the place that answers the question that you've asked me.
Is that actually just a highlight tool?
That's a great question. If we go back to John, we see it highlights it. Lets John know what I'm pointing to so that John can then interact with that. Full disclosure, I gave this presentation to my wife last night. And she asked that same question, which I thought was pretty funny. The second question she asked was, well, can the CSR click on something for me or enter data for me? And the answer is no. We want there to be that privacy between what's going on with the CSR and what's going on with the user. You could even build your application so that you had hidden data fields on your form that when the CSR did a co-browse, they couldn't see that information, even though they were doing this co-browse. That's a configuration that you can put in place to try to help the privacy of that CSR, the privacy of John against what that CSR is trying to accomplish with John. Yes.
Do the CSR or the customer have the ability to look at any prior interactions they had with prior contacts, the prior CSR they spoke to, just so they can recall maybe a conversation that was recorded, basically a chat history?
So the answer is yes. You have access, as the CSR, you have access to all of the interactions that you've had before. We didn't dig into them, but once we finish this, I'll show you exactly where they are and how you could get into them if you needed to get into them. The opposite of that is really your call with your configuration. It's your call. We do give you the capability to allow you to see as the constituent or the consumer to be able to say, here are the previous things that I've done and I want to go back and look at them before I move forward. Okay? So we got through this co-browse. We could work our way through the rest of the application. I'm going to end the co-browse session so the rep can't see anything, and but I'm not going to quit chat because they don't need to see everything I'm doing. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill out the rest of the form with just some default information. And once I get to the end and complete the application, it'll show me the details that I've completed. So this answers part of your question. Any application or any process that you complete, this is a way that we can show all of the details in a read-only format so that you can see the history of that interaction. But in this case, we also send an email. I see what's happening now. I didn't log into that browser. I'll figure that out. But we send an email to John saying your application is complete. Here's your ID so that you can always make reference to it if you need to look it up later or if you need to understand what's going on. So I'm going to close this and I'm going to close this. And the second answer to your question is down at the bottom here. These are all the things that you've done before, or at least in this application that we're allowing you to see. So we're going to go back. The customer has ended the co-browse session. Okay, that's fine. We're okay with that. One of the things that you see that we didn't see before, the first time we did our interaction where we were talking about the tax relief question, on the left-hand side, all we saw was Wrapup. If you look at the bottom now, you see something called the next best action. So based on our history with John, based on us understanding what John has asked for in the past, it is prompting the CSR to say, here might be a next action that you might want to perform, that you might want to talk to John about to see if this is something that he wants to do based on that history. So I can come and say, hey, John, oh, he disconnected his chat. I would have to, at this point, I wouldn't be able to do it, but I would be able to communicate with John. Hey, John, would you like to do this application for tax relief as well? Oh, that would be great. And I could actually initiate that application for John from my side and collect all of his information necessary to get that done and submit that application for John. So he wouldn't have to log back into the system or start to complete an application. I could actually complete that application for him. Or if you decided to configure it a different way where you wanted to send John something for John to start that application, you could do that as well. Okay? Any questions about some of the things that we've discussed here so far? All right. So let's go to the latter part of this. We're going to actually log out, and I'm going to log in as a different CSR. So if John is anything like me, he has positive interactions with software, with vendors, with applications. He likes to go to Twitter and talk about these kinds of transactions and say, you know what? I had a great experience with them today. And send that tweet out, because that's what our constituents do, just random stuff like that. We still want to understand how they feel about what we do. That's part of the whole user experience. So we can set up CSRs, a different kind of CSR called a social CSR. And that social CSR has an application that is built that is listening for keywords that we put out there, listening for hashtags, listening for anything that is related to, in our case, PegaGov. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but it comes back. And I see on my left-hand side a new case from John about a minute ago. And I can open that case up. And what I see is the tweet that he just sent to me. He didn't send it specifically to me, he just broadcast it to the world. It could have been a complaint, it could have been a compliment. If it's a complaint, we want to try to address it, try to direct him to where he can go, what he can get, where he can get his information. If it's a compliment, maybe we just want to say thank you. Thank you. Glad to hear it. And send that response back to John. And John goes back to his Twitter page. And if he opens up that particular tweet, he sees my response. So we are attempting to meet the customer where they are, not making them necessarily come to us. He could have asked a question. Man, I wish there was some information about child health insurance. You got a CSR that's monitoring that social network. They are able to respond and to reply to that network. So John gets this tweet, says, man, this is great. But he's not at home when he gets this tweet. He's out. So he opens up his iPad. Come on, iPad. There we go. Come on. Come on. There you are. I see you. Bang. So this is my iPad, live, running directly off of this real iPad. And John decides he wants to log in. And when he logs in, he sees the exact same application that he saw from his desktop. The application does not have to be built twice based on the fact that I want to use it on my phone, on my tablet, or on my desktop. It's a responsive UI built once, understanding what type of environment you're viewing the application from and making the adjustments to the UI based on that environment. Something as simple as I turn this sideways and it readjusts. This is much closer to what we saw on our desktop. But when I turn it vertical, it resized everything, moved it. Doesn't mean I don't have access to all of the same capabilities, all of the same features from my laptop that I have from my tablet. So I could go through this and I could fill out any application that I wanted to fill out and process anything I wanted to process straight from my iPad. Okay? So we in the home stretch. So let's talk about what we saw. Tailored portals, both for the CSR as well as for the end user, that were directed to what those people were trying to accomplish. We saw some customer service features. We saw the guided interactions where it was prompting you what you can send, what you cannot, what information to help you relay that information back to your person who's asking the questions. We saw some technical features, chat, Cobrowse, the knowledge base that we search. We saw the social engagement where I was able to tweet, and I was actually able to hear that tweet and respond to that tweet. The only thing we haven't seen yet is a bill for change moment. So let's crank up one of those. So I'm going to log in again as me this time because I'm a developer. What you're seeing now is a standard Pega Designer Studio. This is what every Pega application is built in, this Designer Studio. So I'm going to work my way to just a piece of the application. We could go down a long path of where this is, but pretty simple. We're going to get to this point. If this looks familiar to you, it is the application process that we filled out for the unemployment. If you look at those things, the claim assessment, the personal information, the eligibility details, those are the breadcrumbs going across the top. This Visio-like diagram is a great representation of the process flow and how things work going across. We're going to dig into one of them. And what we'll see is the form. We saw this form being filled out. If you don't believe me, we can look. That's the form. Same form. So we come here and we are able to make changes to just this portion of the application without affecting or touching any other portion of the application. So what we'll do is we'll check it out. Because inherently, Pega has a source safe mechanism. You can check in stuff, you can check it out so that two people don't make a mistake of modifying the same rule or the same piece of the environment at the same time. So you don't get those kinds of conflicts. It also gives you historical context. You can see every change that was made to a particular thing so that you can go back and review those things and figure out what you might want to change or what problems you had. So a simple change that always happens in every federal agency I ever worked in is they don't like the way it looks. Doesn't matter what I build, they always say, can you change the colors to green? Or can you change the width to this? So what we're going to do is we're going to move this information. Just very simple. And we're going to save. So we move those things to the right. We're going to save. Now we're going to go back to John and see how our changes look. So we're going to refresh this, and we're going to choose yes. Wait a minute. That stuff is still down there. I know it's still down there. It's still down there because we never checked that information back in. So even though we made the change, we're actually able to review the change and look at the change and even put processing in place to prevent that change from going to the public until we're ready for that change to go to the public. So we're going to go back, and I'm actually going to check this one in, and I actually have to give a comment and say, change that my demo. I check it back in. I go back, I refresh this, and now when I say yes to military, that information is over there. It's just a simple change, but very isolated and very easy to do. Didn't require one line of code or HTML or JavaScript or any of those things. All those is just taken care of, okay? So that's our bill for change moment. So by and large, the customer service application, the way it comes out of the box, is set up in a way for you to just have to configure the things that you need, to add the phrasing that you need, to add the SLAs that you need, to add the timing that you need, and just put it out there to give you an opportunity to help you to reach your customers at the level that they want to be reached. So I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to put this demo in front of you. I'll open the floor. I know we've had some questions. I know it's getting close to 4 o'clock, and I know what traffic is like in DC. I used to work at the FBI building all the time. So, but I open the floor to any questions you guys have, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Yes, sir.
I guess there's two questions. One is when you're creating, let's say, forms, maybe a number of forms within the application here, do you have flexibility to work in conditional responses and business rules?
So the simple answer is yes. You can get a little bit more expansive. You could get a little bit more expansive and say things like, I would like a little bit more information about that, but you could do things like specialization. One of the big advantages of PEGA is specialization. Your ability to say, if this condition is met, I want the form to be displayed this way. If this condition is not met, I want the form to be displayed this way. And that's at a very high level. You could take that all the way down to the individual fields. If this person meets this criteria, show this field. If this person doesn't, don't show this field. So you could absolutely specialize it to any individual that you would need to, or any group, or however you want to define how you want to break that out. So the simple answer is yes. Y'all got me for like 3 more minutes. No need? Oh, okay. Oh.
This isn't really related specifically to what you were talking about, but can you talk about the integration of, the points that are available between PEGA for customer service and, say, your IVR or ACD application, like the APIs? How do you integrate with
Sure.
websites?
So this is such a wonderful question because I got into a discussion with my manager about whether or not I was going to include a particular slide. And I actually did, and he doesn't know that I did because we didn't talk about it last night, but I put it in anyway. So with PEGA, there's really, the integration is broken down pretty simply. We have connectors that allow us to communicate with outside applications. Then we have services that allow outside applications to communicate back to us. And then we have transformations that allow us to massage that data either coming or going so that the application receiving the information receives it in the method that they require, and that we receive it in the method that we require when it comes back to us. We use a, huh? No, these are just standard out-of-the-box capabilities. These are just standard across the board. Doesn't matter if it's customer service or PEGA 7. These are just standard PEGA things. We typically, that's wrong. We absolutely work to protocol standards. It's almost impossible to build an application that is totally able to be used by every other application everywhere in the world. So we don't. What we say is, what are the protocol standards? HTTP, XML, messaging. What are those protocol standards? And we will create connectors that allow us to communicate with any of those standards. So as long as your application can use any one of the standard interactive protocols that are available and are agreed upon by the International Standards Association, then we can actually communicate with you backwards and forwards. So that's how we typically integrate, even with IVR and with the chat and all other things, is we use the standard protocols to do those things. This slide actually has all that information, and I just think it's funny. He just left. So he and I are gonna laugh about this later, because he said, that's too technical, don't put that in there. I said, okay, and I moved it to the bottom. Any other questions? Again, I thank you for your time. Enjoy your ride home. I appreciate you coming out to go. Sorry, I lost my breath for a minute there. Government empowered. You've made the event a huge success, and we're looking very, very forward to working with you guys in the future. Very, very forward.